Under the soft, golden light of the chandeliers, Elysium Garden Restaurant buzzed with an understated elegance. The gentle melodies of a piano floated in the air, mingling with the delicate clinking of silverware against china. Tables were draped in pristine white linens, and couples spoke in hushed tones. In a dimly lit corner near the window, a young woman guided her wheelchair with quiet resolve. Her ivory dress cascaded over her knees, shimmering like silk in the light. Her long blonde hair was loosely braided over one shoulder, framing her gentle features like a delicate crown. Emily Dawson, 24, appeared both fragile and incredibly brave. She took a deep breath, composing herself as a tall man approached. His stride was confident, almost theatrical. Asterisk. That must be him. Raymond. Asterisk, she thought, straightening up and offering a polite smile. Without a word, he pulled out the chair across from her, adjusted his red silk tie, and glanced at her with a hint of irritation. "Oh, it's you. I was expecting someone else." Emily's smile didn't waver. Her voice remained calm, though the corners of her eyes tightened slightly. "Hello. Thank you for coming. I'm Emily." "I know," he said flatly. "Veronica told me all about you." Her stomach clenched. Veronica, the woman she still referred to as Mom, though the word had long since lost its warmth. Veronica was her stepmother, a master of delivering cutting remarks with a sweet smile. Before Emily left the house, Veronica had said, "You should be grateful, Emily. Not everyone is brave enough to date a girl in a wheelchair. Try not to scare him off." That sentence had followed her here, growing louder with each of Raymond's words. He snapped his fingers at a waitress. "A bottle of Bordeaux, 1,999. Then he smirked. "Actually, never mind. She probably doesn't drink, right? Gotta stay alert when you're rolling around all day." Several heads turned. Emily's face flushed. "Could you please lower your voice?" "What?" he said, feigning innocence. "Just asking," he continued with a laugh. "I mean, women who can't move half their body probably aren't into dancing or drinking, right?" His laugh sounded hollow and insincere. Emily's hands tightened on the armrests of her wheelchair, her knuckles turning white. "Did you come here just to humiliate me?" "No," he shrugged. "I came to see what kind of girl thinks being paralyzed still qualifies her for love. Stay home next time. Spare everyone the awkwardness." The restaurant fell silent. Even the music seemed to fade. Some guests stared with pity, while others looked on with amusement. The waitress hovered nearby, unsure of what to do. Emily took a deep breath. Her chest rose and fell. Her voice trembled, but it held firm. "You don't get to talk to me like that." "I do," he said smugly. "This is real life. No guy wants a girl who can't walk. Men want women who can serve them well, not sit around waiting to be pushed." A voice cut through the air from behind. It was calm, resonant, and sharp. "You're right about one thing. This world does have its share of people who forgot how to behave." Raymond turned around, confused. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a crisp white shirt. A titanium watch gleamed on his wrist, but it was his eyes, intense and unwavering, that commanded the room. "I was at the next table. I heard every word," the man continued. "Say one more thing to this woman, and I'll ask the manager to escort you out. Or I'll do it myself." Raymond scoffed. "Who the hell are you?" He tried again. But the man raised his hand, silencing him. "She is a woman with dignity. You, on the other hand, are a loud man in a cheap suit who mistakes arrogance for value." The room froze. "You can leave now," the man said quietly, "or I'll get security." Raymond muttered something under his breath, threw some bills on the table, and stormed out. The man turned his attention to Emily. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to create a scene, but I couldn't just sit by and let that happen." Emily looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "You didn't have to step in." "No," he said, "but I needed to. Some things must be challenged." He pulled out the chair across from her. "If you don't mind, I'd like to sit. I promise not to bring up your wheelchair." That made her laugh, a soft, genuine laugh through her tears. He signaled the waitress. "Grilled scallops for the lady and peppermint tea." Emily blinked. "How did you know I like scallops?" "I didn't. You just stared at it on the menu the longest." The restaurant seemed to collectively exhale. The lights above cast a warm glow on Emily's golden braid as the man poured her tea. She wrapped her fingers around the cup, the warmth spreading through her hands. He looked up, his gaze sincere. "People often think weakness is about what you can't do, but I think real strength lies in those who keep showing up anyway." Emily smiled, feeling truly seen. Somewhere nearby, someone clapped. Not loudly, but just enough to acknowledge something rare: kindness. The air outside was still, imbued with the quiet hush of midnight. Street lamps cast a warm glow over the meticulously trimmed hedges of the small park across from Elysium Garden. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like a soft whisper. Nathan had insisted on walking Emily out, not to her car, but to the garden trail nearby. It was a peaceful spot, secluded from the steps and murmur of the restaurant. The tension from earlier still lingered in her chest, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt safe. They stopped beside a wooden bench. Nathan took a seat, and Emily turned her wheelchair slightly to face him. She broke the silence. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. He looked at her, waiting for her to clarify. "For a stranger, I mean," she explained. "You didn't know me. Why stand up like that?" Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because some things, if you don't act on them in the moment they happen, you regret them forever." His voice was low and calm, without any attempt to impress or dramatize. It just felt honest. Emily nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. The light from a nearby lamp shimmered in her hair. "People usually look away," she said. "Or worse, they look right through me. It's like I vanish into the chair." Nathan's gaze didn't waver. It remained fixed on her. "I saw you," he said simply. A small silence settled between them again. Crickets chirped faintly in the distance. She glanced down at her lap, her fingers lightly brushing over the fabric of her dress. "I used to dive," she said, seemingly out of nowhere. He turned toward her, giving her his full attention. "Dive, scuba," she nodded. "Oceans, coral reefs, marine life. I was studying marine biology before the accident." Nathan didn't interrupt. She continued, her voice soft but steady. "I loved the silence underwater. Everything felt free, alive, colorful, curious. I always thought I'd work at a conservation center, travel, dive in different seas." She paused, her eyes growing distant. "Now," she added, "I can't even stand on my own." Nathan didn't respond with pity. He didn't reach for her hand or offer empty platitudes. Instead, he offered space for her to share. "I grew up near the ocean too," he said after a moment. "Tiny coastal town. My mom used to wake me up before sunrise to watch the waves crash. She said the ocean reminded her that everything keeps moving forward, no matter what." Emily smiled faintly. "Your mom sounds wise." "She was," he said. "She died when I was 16. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loss, different in its details, but deeply understood. "I don't let myself dream much anymore," she admitted. "It just makes the waking up harder." Nathan nodded slowly. Then he asked gently, "If you had one day completely yours, no limits, where would you go?" Emily didn't need to think. "The beach," she said. "Somewhere quiet with seashells and soft waves. Somewhere no one looks at me like I'm broken. Nathan's expression shifted, not with sadness, but with warmth. Then, "This weekend," he said, "we go to the beach." She blinked. "What? This weekend?" he repeated, smiling. "No grand plan, no pressure, just waves and seashells, and you." Her eyes welled up with something she hadn't felt in a long time: anticipation. He didn't offer to rescue her. He didn't speak like a man who saw her as someone to fix. Instead, he made a simple offer to be present, to share the experience. It wasn't grand, it wasn't loud, but in that moment, it was everything. Emily smiled through a breathless laugh. "Okay," she said, "let's go to the beach." Nathan leaned back on the bench, looking up at the stars. "It's a date, then." And in the still night, under the glow of street lamps and stars, something in Emily began to shift. Not her legs, but her heart. It stirred awake softly, slowly, with the whisper of a promise she never expected, that perhaps she wasn't alone. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when they arrived. The sky was awash in soft pastels, peach, lavender, and a blue so pale it looked almost white. Morning mist clung to the shoreline like a delicate veil. The beach stretched endlessly, untouched and silent, save for the rhythmic hush of waves rolling in. Nathan parked the car and walked around to the back, gently lifting the folded wheelchair from the trunk. Emily stepped out slowly with his help, settled into her chair, and pulled a wide-brimmed straw hat over her golden braid. She wore a flowing white dress that danced lightly in the ocean breeze. As Nathan began pushing her along the damp, compact sand, she tilted her head back, inhaling deeply. "It smells like salt and freedom," she said, her voice nearly carried off by the wind. He smiled behind her. "I used to come here every morning when I was a kid, before the world got louder." They moved slowly down the beach. The rising tide left foamy trails behind them, and seabirds circled overhead, their calls sharp and distant. The serenity of the place enveloped them like a secret. Then, suddenly, the wheelchair jolted. The front wheels had caught on a hidden rock beneath the sand. Emily gasped as her body lurched forward. She hit the ground with a soft thud, sand clinging to the side of her dress. She winced, but didn't cry out. Instinctively, she tried to prop herself up with her arms. Her breath quickened. Before she could say anything, strong arms slipped beneath her shoulders and knees. Nathan didn't say a word. He lifted her effortlessly, cradling her like something precious, not fragile, but deeply important. His movements were steady and careful. He stepped away from the chair and carried her closer to the shoreline, where the sand was damp and cool. The water crept up in small waves, kissing the earth and retreating again. Nathan knelt and placed her gently on the sand, then crouched beside her. With quiet attentiveness, he brushed the hem of her dress down and adjusted her legs, straightening them slowly so they lay comfortably in front of her. Then he simply sat just beside her, his elbows resting on his knees. A wave rolled in, washing over her feet. Emily's lips parted. The water was cold, but not unpleasant. It sent a jolt through her, not of pain, not of fear, but something else, something like being alive. Her eyes welled up. She looked down at her toes, buried slightly in the sand, the ocean lapping at them gently again and again. Tears escaped down her cheeks. "It's been so long," she whispered. "So long since I've felt anything like this, since I felt like I was still part of the world." Nathan didn't reply. He reached into the sand with his fingers and began drawing. She watched as he carved shapes into the surface, dark ridges forming against the golden grains. First a horizon, then a sliver of sun emerging from it, rays stretching out into the sky. Around it, he drew shadows, a suggestion of night still lingering but breaking. She understood. He was drawing dawn after the dark. Emily's breath hitched. The lump in her throat finally gave way to a quiet sob, not a broken sound, but a release. Nathan paused, then extended a hand, not toward her face to wipe her tears, but simply upward, palm open, an invitation. "If you need a place to lean," he said gently. She looked at him for a moment, then shifted. Her head rested lightly on his shoulder, her cheek pressing into the fabric of his shirt. They sat like that for what felt like hours, speaking nothing, saying everything. The waves kept coming. At some point, the sun had fully risen, warm and high, casting gold onto the water. Seagulls swooped closer. A breeze stirred her braid. Time passed, and still they stayed, until the sky began to shift again, turning shades of gold and rose. The horizon bled with the coming of evening. Emily tilted her head, watching as the sun began its descent. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I used to think moments like this were over for me." Nathan didn't respond with words. He simply leaned his head gently against hers, and in that silent communion, with salt air on their skin and the ocean singing quietly at their feet, something deeper than romance bloomed. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a vow. It was a moment, a sacred healing moment that said, "You're not alone anymore." It started with a headline, "Wheelchair Girl or Gold Digger. Mysterious woman accused of faking disability to trap CEO Nathan Carter." The article went viral within hours, accompanied by blurry photos of Emily and Nathan at the beach. The piece was laced with cruel speculation, anonymous sources, and wild accusations that she had exaggerated, if not completely fabricated, her paralysis for attention and money. Emily sat frozen in front of her laptop, the screen casting a pale light onto her face. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through hundreds of comments. "She's totally scamming him. Pretty sure I saw her walk once. Disgusting. Using a wheelchair as a prop. It felt like drowning without water." Every cruel word hit her like a stone to the chest. Her phone buzzed again, Nathan's name glowing on the screen for the 4th time that morning. She didn't pick up. Instead, she turned it off. Nathan stood outside her apartment that night, knocking gently, then louder. No response. The lights were off, curtains drawn. He texted, called again, waited, but silence met him every time. She had shut him out completely. He didn't get angry. He didn't demand answers. He knew what was happening. Sometimes the ones hurting most are the ones who go quiet first. Still, he knew he couldn't let it end like this. 3 days later, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway of the Dawson family home. Nathan stepped out, a folder in his hand, and rang the doorbell with steady purpose. To his surprise, it wasn't Emily who answered, but her father, Charles Dawson. "Mr. Carter," the older man said, his eyebrows raised in confusion. "Is something wrong?" "I need to speak with you," Nathan said calmly. "And your wife, please." A moment later, they sat in the living room, the tension as thick as the silence between them. Veronica entered gracefully, her smile overly sweet. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" she asked, sitting with folded legs and clasped hands. Nathan placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, and, most damning of all, audio recordings. One played aloud. "Just leak it. Say she lied about her legs. Who's going to prove otherwise? Once the media tears her down, Nathan will run." Veronica's voice was crystal clear. Charles turned to his wife in stunned disbelief. You did this?" Veronica's smile faltered. "It's not what it sounds like. You told people my daughter was faking her injury?" His voice cracked. "You tried to ruin her life again?" Nathan spoke now, his voice calm but laced with steel. "She manipulated the media to destroy Emily's reputation because she was afraid Emily might have a future she couldn't control." He looked directly at Veronica, "And I also found proof of something else. The tampered brake line on Emily's old car. It wasn't just an accident, was it?" Silence. The room seemed to shrink. Charles stood, his hands shaking. "Get out," he said, barely above a whisper. Veronica's face went pale. "Charles." I said. "Get out of this house." He pointed toward the door. "And don't you dare come near Emily again. I should have seen through you years ago. I let my daughter believe her pain was an accident, when it was something much darker." Tears welled in his eyes. Veronica left with no more words. As the front door slammed behind her, the silence that followed was different, heavier, yes, but clearer, like fog finally lifting. Charles sat down again, burying his face in his hands. Nathan placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "She still needs you," he said softly, "but she needs to know the truth." Charles nodded, broken. Outside, the wind carried the scent of salt and rain. Nathan looked toward the sky, then down the path where he would soon find Emily again, not to rescue her, not to fix anything, but to stand beside her unshakably. The days that followed were heavy. Emily barely left her room. The curtains stayed drawn, her phone untouched, meals left unfinished. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, present but fading. The sharp sting of betrayal, the weight of shame, the resurfacing of old wounds, it all pressed down on her chest like a stone she couldn't lift. Her father checked in often, remorseful and gentle, but she offered only soft reassurances that she was fine. She wasn't. Then, on the third morning, she found a small package by her door. Inside was a single seashell, soft pink, spiral-shaped, and a note written in Nathan's careful handwriting. Asterisk. The waves were strong today, but the little starfish stayed holding tight to the rocks. You remind me of that. Asterisk. She stared at it for a long time. The next day, another shell arrived, a tiny sand dollar, cracked slightly on one side. Asterisk. Even broken things are treasures when the tide brings them in. Asterisk. Each day after that, the offerings continued: a coral fragment, a shimmering scallop shell, a pearl-white chip of sea glass. Each came with words that weren't trying to fix her, just to see her. Asterisk. The shore is quieter without you. Asterisk. Asterisk. The gulls still fly. Asterisk. Asterisk. The sea still waits. Asterisk. Asterisk. You're not alone, Emily. Asterisk. 14 days passed. On the 15th, she picked up her phone. Her hands trembled a little. She stared at his contact name. Then, with a breath she didn't know she was holding, she pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. Emily. His voice was calm, steady, familiar. There was a pause. Then she whispered, "I miss the beach and the sun you drew in the sand." A breath of silence passed between them, soft as a tide. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. They didn't meet at a restaurant or a park. Nathan drove her back to the same beach. The sky was overcast this time, the waves choppier, but it didn't matter. She didn't need apologies. He didn't need explanations. When their eyes met, everything that needed to be said passed between them in silence. He walked toward her slowly. She rolled forward just a few inches. When they reached each other, he crouched beside her wheelchair. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the very first shell he had sent. "I kept them all," she said, her voice catching slightly. "They reminded me I hadn't disappeared." Nathan smiled, his eyes soft. "You never did. You just needed space to remember who you are." Emily's lips trembled, then curved gently upward. She looked out toward the ocean, mist curling off the waves. "Thank you," she said. Nathan didn't answer. He just took her hand, quiet, steady, present. And there, on that familiar stretch of sand, she began to feel something settle inside her again. Not everything was healed, but the tide was turning. Emily's world began to expand again, not back to what it had been before, but into something entirely new, something purposeful. With Nathan's quiet encouragement, She started a small project, an ocean education initiative designed for children with disabilities. She called it Tidewise, a play on words, wisdom from the tides. It combined her deep love for marine life with her newfound mission to make space for others like her, who often felt forgotten in classrooms and field trips. Nathan offered to fund the program from the beginning, but when she tried to list his name under patron sponsor, he gently refused. "This is your voice," he said. "It deserves to shine without my shadow." Emily smiled, knowing it was the kindest kind of support, the kind that lifts you without taking credit for it. They hosted their first outreach event at a coastal nature preserve, a day-long program called Beach Cleanup with the Mermaid. Flyers had been printed with a hand-drawn cartoon of a smiling girl in a seashell tiara and a long mermaid tail trailing into the waves. On the morning of the event, a dozen kids in wheelchairs, braces, and sensory headsets gathered by the shore, chattering excitedly. Volunteers from the local community had come too, most of them drawn by word of mouth and curiosity about the radiant blonde woman behind the project. Emily rolled into the center of the group, her long braid tucked neatly into a sun hat, her lap covered in a soft ocean blue blanket. She wore a pin on her shirt, two dolphins chasing each other in a loop. As the children settled on the sand, Emily began to speak. She told them about coral reefs, how they were like underwater cities full of color and movement. She described how dolphins could recognize their own reflections and how sea turtles used the Earth's magnetic field to find their way home. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, her hands animated, her voice full of life. The children hung on every word. One little girl raised her hand and asked, "Do mermaids get scared?" Emily smiled. "Of course," she said. "But they keep swimming anyway, even when the ocean gets rough." A few hours later, everyone was given gloves and small buckets. They combed the beach together, collecting plastic wrappers, stray fishing lines, bottle caps. Laughter echoed across the sand as Emily told riddles about seahorses and shared facts about jellyfish that glowed in the dark. At one point, she paused to adjust the straps of a young boy's backpack. As she did, a breeze lifted the edge of her hat. She looked up and saw him. Nathan stood farther down the beach, just beyond the reach of the cleanup circle. He hadn't announced himself. He hadn't asked to speak. He was simply watching, his hands in his pockets, the wind catching his shirt as he stood barefoot on the edge of the tide. Their eyes met across the sand. He smiled, not the smile of a man impressed, but of a man in awe. When the event ended, as families packed up and volunteers gathered the last of the bins, Nathan walked toward her. He said nothing at first, just helped fold the small table with flyers and tucked it neatly into her. Then, his voice filled with a quiet admiration. He looked directly at her. "You've lived more beautifully than anyone I've ever known who could walk." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't crave applause. She didn't yearn for headlines. She already possessed everything she needed. Right here, right now. She had him. The rumors, unfortunately, never truly ceased. Despite their quiet, unwavering strength, despite their deliberate attempts to maintain privacy, the tabloids relentlessly sought ways to distort Emily and Nathan's story into something shallow and sensationalized. Articles appeared, filled with speculation about Nathan's underlying motivations. Anonymous, shadowy sources whispered that Emily was merely a carefully orchestrated component of a public relations scheme. Still others stubbornly insisted that she was exaggerating the severity of her condition to garner sympathy and attention. It was irrelevant how many beach cleanup events she spearheaded, how many children she inspired with her resilience and determination. For some, the narrative was simply too improbable to be genuine, too overwhelmingly positive, too exceptionally pure, too unreservedly gentle. Emily made a conscious effort to avoid reading the comments and online discussions, but inevitably, Some would still filter through, reaching her and causing a pang of hurt. Some nights, she'd silently roll her wheelchair into the living room and sit in the darkness, grappling with doubt, wondering if the force of their love was truly robust enough to withstand the crushing weight of public scrutiny and judgment. Nathan noticed. He saw it subtly manifested in the way she hesitated before posting anything online, the slight apprehension in her eyes. He observed how she subtly avoided cameras at public events, and how her radiant smile would just barely dim when approached by strangers. And so, he made a decision. He chose not to reveal his plan to her. He simply arrived at the television studio one Friday morning, after a discreet phone call to a highly respected morning show host. The network had been persistently trying to secure an interview with him for years, but he had always declined. Now, finally, he agreed, but only under one specific condition. No business-related inquiries, no blatant product placements, simply unvarnished truth. The segment aired live, broadcast to the nation. Nathan Carter sat calmly under the soft, flattering studio lighting, dressed in a simple, elegant charcoal blazer, his hands clasped loosely and naturally in his lap. The host leaned forward slightly, sensing a profound shift in his demeanor. "Mr. Carter," she began, "you've intentionally kept your personal life out of the public eye for many years. Why the sudden decision to speak out now?" Nathan gazed directly into the camera, his voice measured and calm, but imbued with unwavering conviction. "Because silence," he stated firmly, "can sometimes be interpreted as complicity, and I refuse to be complicit in the way this world mistreats someone I love." The host blinked, momentarily taken aback by his directness. "So, it's true then," she inquired, "that you and Emily Dawson are together?" Nathan affirmed. "She is the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. She doesn't walk, but she walked into my life like the first light, after a long and difficult night, not to rescue me, but simply to show me the true meaning of strength." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. The studio fell silent, the crew captivated. "She's not a symbol," he continued, his voice gaining intensity. "She's not a headline. She's not merely an abstract concept or an idea. She is a human being, a scientist, a teacher, a woman with dreams and fears, and an immense capacity for joy. And I will absolutely not allow people to define her solely by the chair she sits in." The host swallowed, visibly moved. The camera subtly panned to the studio audience, who sat in hushed silence, some visibly emotional. Nathan looked down for a brief moment, collecting his thoughts, then looked back up into the camera. "I love her," he declared simply. "That's it. That's all anyone truly needs to know." The clip went viral almost instantly, before the show had even concluded its broadcast. Within hours, the entire tone of the public conversation shifted dramatically. The very same media outlets that had previously mocked and ridiculed now offered praise and support. Social media platforms overflowed with heartfelt messages of encouragement and solidarity. Parents of children with disabilities posted touching photos of their kids watching the broadcast, adding captions like, "She gives my daughter hope. She shows her what's possible." Emily received thousands of letters, filled with admiration and gratitude. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young girl in a hospital bed who wrote in colorful marker, "I want to be just like you when I grow up. I want to be a mermaid who saves the ocean too." A week later, the National Foundation for Disability Advocacy extended an invitation to Emily, asking her to become their youngest ever ambassador. When she rolled onto the stage at their annual gala, resplendent in a midnight blue dress and her signature braid, the entire room erupted in thunderous applause, a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Nathan waited patiently in the wings, his heart overflowing with pride and love. She looked out over the audience and smiled, not nervously or self-consciously, and certainly not modestly, but with the quiet, unwavering power of someone who no longer questioned her place in the world, because now everyone understood. She didn't require legs to conquer the world and leave an indelible mark. The sky was still a deep, velvety dark when they arrived at the beach. A gentle, whispering breeze rustled through the dunes as Nathan carefully guided Emily's wheelchair down the familiar, well-worn path toward the ocean. The same beach, the very same quiet, secluded stretch of sand where, just 1 year earlier, everything had begun to transform and shift into something beautiful and profound. Emily wore a soft, cream-colored sweater and loose, flowing linen pants. Her hair, still radiant and golden and meticulously braided, peeked out from beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat. Nathan carried a thermos of steaming hot tea in one hand, a neatly folded blanket tucked securely under his arm, and an undercurrent of nervous energy that he valiantly attempted to conceal behind his steady, purposeful steps. They reached the shore just as the first delicate shades of pale lavender began to paint the horizon, signaling the imminent arrival of dawn. He carefully laid the blanket down on the sand, then gently and tenderly lifted her from her wheelchair, just as he had done on that unforgettable first morning, and carried her to the exact same spot near the water's edge. The tide was unusually calm today, the waves lapping softly at the sand with a rhythmic cadence that felt almost reverent. Emily's legs stretched out in front of her, her bare toes brushing lightly against the cool, damp grains. Nathan adjusted her position with the utmost care and attention, ensuring her comfort, then sat down beside her, their shoulders gently touching. Neither of them spoke for a long while. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. Emily closed her eyes and simply listened to the symphony of the beach, the cries of the seagulls overhead, the soothing hush of the incoming tide, and the steady and comforting rhythm of her own heart beating in harmony beside his. Then, without warning, Nathan stood up. Emily opened her eyes, momentarily confused, until she saw him reach into the pocket of his jacket and pull out a small, exquisitely crafted velvet pouch. Her breath caught in her throat. He knelt down on one knee in the sand, the rising sun casting a warm, golden glow over his face, illuminating his features. He carefully opened the pouch. Inside rested a ring. It was delicate and understated, crafted from intricately woven silver, but at its center sat a single, perfectly polished seashell, small and exquisitely spiraled, with a soft, delicate pink hue, reminiscent of the very first shell he had sent her so long ago. Nathan looked up at her, and for a brief, fleeting moment, he could barely manage to speak, overcome by emotion. "You once told me that you were afraid you were a burden," he said, his voice low and husky but unwavering. She nodded slowly, already blinking back a torrent of tears. He smiled, his eyes shining with unshed tears of his own. "But the truth is," he continued, "you've carried me through silence, through storms, through periods of intense doubt. You've held me up more than you could possibly ever know." Emily swallowed hard, her lips trembling with emotion. "I don't want to walk ahead of you or behind you," he declared, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want to carry this life together with you, right beside you, for all the days that we have left." He held the ring out toward her, his hand open and extended. "Emily Dawson, will you marry me?" Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to articulate a single word. Nathan gently and reverently slipped the ring onto her finger, then leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently to hers. They remained like that, wrapped in each other's embrace and sharing each other's breath, as the sun finally rose in its full splendor behind them. Warm, radiant gold spilled over the horizon, touching and illuminating the sand, the sea, and the intertwined outlines of two souls who had found each other in the most unexpected and improbable of ways. From far above, the scene would resemble a breathtaking painting, two figures sitting side by side on a vast stretch of beach, the boundless ocean behind them and beside them, and etched in the sand, a faint, ephemeral drawing of a sunrise, just as Nathan had once drawn with his fingers so long ago. But this time, it was not just a drawing. This time, it was undeniably real. If this story resonated with you, touched your heart, reminded you of the transformative power of kindness, or simply offered you a flicker of hope, please don't forget to subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales. Here, we share emotional, healing, and deeply human stories like Emily and Nathan's every week. Love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Hit the like button, share this story with someone who needs it, and join our ever-growing community of hearts that still believe in the inherent goodness of humanity. Because sometimes, just sometimes, a single act of love can irrevocably change a lifetime. Subscribe now.